Really one of the long-standing historians for vineyard growth in Nevada County. Peter was there at the very beginning, and more than anyone else, Peter remembers and has the stories to tell about how the first modern vineyards got planted in Nevada County. So I'd like right now to welcome Peter Arnold as my guest. Welcome, Peter. Welcome to Wine Talk.
Well, thank you.
So I know that the first modern vineyard in Nevada County was planted in 1974, and I know that you were very involved in that. Can you tell us, when you arrived in Nevada County, how it is that you were here, and a little bit about your connection with that vineyard?
Well, it's interesting because John Callender's wife's stepfather was a very, very close friend of my uncle, and he'd run a summer camp that I'd gone to, and he was like a sort of an older brother and second father to me in a way. Mm-hmm. So that the Callenders invited the whole family, my wife and 2 kids and I, up for my son and me to go quail hunting. And we got up there, and I always remember saying, "Gee, I bet this could be great vineyard country." I knew nothing about vineyards.
And this was in what year was this?
This was early in 1974.
Okay.
Oh, no, 73.
1973.
73, yeah. And John said, "Yeah, we're going to put in a vineyard, as a matter of fact." And that's interesting. So we wound up 6 months later living up here, having bought this place.
You were living in the Bay Area prior to that?
Yeah, we were in Tiburon at that time. So we moved up, and we figured that Tiburon was not all the best environment for the kids anyway, and it was a kind of a back-to-the-land thing. I thought I could do it. I don't know how well I really did do it. But anyway, the Callender vineyard went in, and I decided, well, we'll put in a vineyard too.
Well, slow down. So the Callender, tell us where in the county was that vineyard?
That's down the extreme southwest corner off Perimeter Road, which Perimeter Road was called that because that was the perimeter of the old Camp Beale Army.
So it was the eastern edge of Camp Beale?
Eastern side of Camp Beale, right.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And now my understanding is that John Callender purchased a fairly significant hunk of land out there?
Yeah, they had 1,500 acres there, the old Struckman Ranch, and it was a long strip that went north and south, from Garden Bar north all the way up against the old Double Diamond.
And is it true or not that it was his intention to develop 40-acre parcels with houses and vineyards, and was going to have mini vineyard ranches?
Not originally. Originally, what happened was that as the cattle market started to slide in 73 and 74, and so he was casting about to see what.
So he was running cattle was his original idea?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he had no idea of the subdivision at that point.
Okay.
That came later. He was even looking at catfish farming, possibly, as something to do.
So he had the idea of planting the vineyard?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how did you get involved?
Well, just because I suddenly got involved because they moved. They moved to Santa Barbara, and so I wound up managing the vineyard for them.
So you had moved your family up here. You
Yeah.
had purchased some land.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And because you were friends, he said, "Peter, I need someone to operate the vineyard." Mm-hmm. Were you involved in the planting of that vineyard?
No, I wasn't, oddly enough. We'd moved up here. I think perhaps I did a lot of international work in those days.
Now, you were a forester.
Right, yeah. And I may have been on a project in Brazil at the time. I really don't remember. But I had nothing to do with the actual planting of the vineyard.
Okay, now one of the names that I've heard in speaking with people about this vineyard is a fellow by the name of Rick Foreman. And
right.
Rick became quite famous as the winemaker at Sterling Vineyards and has since gone on to have Foreman Vineyard and Winery.
Right.
What was his connection, and how did he play a role in this vineyard?
John had gone down to Davis to talk to people, and then Rick was a native of Nevada City. And so
so Rick grew up here?
Yeah,
okay.
He grew up here. And so I'm not sure just exactly how that connection, whether Davis had anything to do with it or not. It might have. But John and Rick connected somehow. And he was the one who engineered.
And it was a seven acres that were planted, and
Right.
and in fact we've got a couple of pictures. I think the pictures are the calendar kids.
Yeah, right.
Looking like little 8 and 10 and so year olds
right.
out there in the hot sun, because it
Right.
can be quite hot down there in
Absolutely.
the South County.
Mm-hmm.
And it was planted. The vineyard was planted to 7 different red varietals.
Right.
Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
I keep winning. I'm going to remember them all. Yeah, Zinfandel, Cabernet, Pinot Noir, Petit Syrah, Grignolino, Sirexia, and Charbonneau.
I got them. Okay. and I think now I've always been a little confused about this, because in 1974. The California wine renaissance was just at the very beginning.
Yeah, right.
Robert Mondavi built his winery in Oakville in 1966. It was the first major winery to be built since Prohibition anywhere in California. So here it is, only 8 years later than that. So it's just the very, very beginning of the California wine renaissance. White wine was much more popular. Why were red varieties, and why especially some obscure ones like Sirexia and Grignolino?
Yeah. Very strange. I don't know, except that probably you look at down in Amador County and whatnot. I think that was largely reds, and maybe Foreman took it on that basis. That
well, the only place growing grapes in the only people that had wintered through the whole post-Prohibition era, and they were all red.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you think that's it? Okay. Yeah. Now I know that there's a somewhat of an infamous story connected to this vineyard about. I actually gathered a bottle from you one time that you were pouring at a Grape Day event that we had in the very early 1980s, and it was labeled Little Wolf Vineyard. And it had a story of a Petit Syrah, a Pinot Noir that won an award in Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't actually true. Well, tell us about that story. What happened there?
What happened there was here were these 7 varietals, and this fellow Doug Watson of La Purissima Winery, who came up to take the first harvest. We had to find out which ones were they, which rows had which varieties. So I called John, and he sent me back a list of what they were, and he said number 2 was Pinot Noir. So I said, okay, Doug, number 2 was Pinot Noir.
Row number 2.
Rows 2 to 7, whatever it was.
Okay.
But anyway, that block, block 2 was Pinot Noir. So in good faith, he pressed them. He stemmed them, crushed, pressed, made them into wine, and was very, very impressed with it, and entered it in the Orange County Fair as a Pinot Noir, and it took a silver medal.
As a 1978... 1976.
Right.
1976 Pinot Noir. And what was the problem?
Well, it was Petit Syrah. John had misidentified which rows were which blocks were which.
So the wine that won the first award in modern Nevada County history was entered as Pinot Noir was Petit Syrah.
Yeah, it was a sheep in wolf's clothing.
And they loved it for its deep color, robust flavor,
right.
and I think most people who drink wine would know that Pinot Noir and Petit Syrah are very different animals. That's right. Now when the vineyard was planted in 1974, so then the first crop would have been 76.
Right.
But there were no wineries in Nevada County. So what did you do with the grapes? How'd that work out?
Well, that was really funny, because I knowing nothing really about vineyard management and whatnot, I'd seen all these little flower clusters, but hadn't paid much attention to them.
Okay.
All of a sudden I realized there were grapes. And what are we going to do with them?
Yeah.
So I notified John, and John said, well, see what you can find out. Well, I had a cousin who belonged to the Bohemian Club in San Francisco.
Okay.
And he was a great wine buff. He was on their wine committee. So he talked to Doug Watson's father, and Doug Watson's father said, well, my son is starting La Purissima Winery down in Sunnyvale. So that's where we got hooked up with Doug Watson. And so for the first 2 or 3 years, he took all the grapes.
And so in 76 he makes the Pinot Petit,
Right.
Petit
Right.
Pinot, whatever it was, and made wine 77, 78. And now, whatever happened to all that wine?
Well, it was very unfortunate. He fell on hard times, and except for what he bottled from 1976, it stayed in the barrel. It stayed in the barrel, and it was gone. It was so oaky that was nothing ever could be done with it.
So you had a chance to taste it, or did you ever go down there?
Yeah, I went down there. Actually, I brought some back to try to see if they wanted to buy it.
Okay.
And it was gone.
It just was either vinegar or just tasted horrible.
Yeah.
So there really was nothing to show for those first years.
That's right. Right.
Okay. Now that vineyard spurred some other vineyards. Is that not right?
I'm not sure it was the vineyard itself. There just was kind of a general increase in interest about it.
About wine.
About wines and about vineyards. And
okay,
whatnot.
and in the late 70s this
yeah,
would have
and I'm not sure it was John's vineyard or Bob Wilder who had put the second one in. And Bob and John worked completely separately from one another. They had no interaction whatsoever.
Now, Bob Wilder is still around.
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
And now, where was his vineyard?
It was way over off Rattlesnake Road, off toward Colfax.
Okay.
Off 174.
And that vineyard is still in existence?
It's still in existence. He said it's Cabernet and Chardonnay, and he says he's going to yank the Cabernet this year.
Now, Bob must be getting on a little bit?
He's not as far on as I am.
Okay, then he's a youngster then. Okay, all right, that's good. And now you planted a vineyard. You were bitten by the same bug
right.
and got in. Now, what did you do?
We asked Rick what he thought we should plant, and he said, "Well, why don't you go to White's?" So we got a whole bunch of wood, and everything at that time, except for the Calendar Vineyard, was planted on his own rootstock. And actually the Calendar Vineyard was too, as far as that goes, because the Calendar Vineyard was what they called mispropagated stock that the Oakey nurseries had done. It's a very, very technical... It's not done anymore, I don't think. But
I'm not sure what it is.
Well, they take slips of wood, and they keep it in a very, very tightly controlled environment, a very tightly controlled temperature and humidity.
Uh-huh.
And these things will just burst into flower.
Okay.
And, into the leaf.
Okay.
And in no time, that picture shows that those vines were about this tall at that time.
Right.
And they were only a few months old, actually.
Okay.
But all the rest of us rooted them.
So just on because I know I was involved in planting the Cobden Vineyard, and it was we just planted them right in the dirt,
right,
upside down the first time, but that's another story.
Yeah.
So where was your vineyard?
About 3.5 miles south.
And what did you plant?
We planted Sauvignon Blanc. I had rooted a bunch of Gewürztraminer, but. I just put in a few vines of that, and we did everything in Sauvignon Blanc.
Sauvignon Blanc, because white wine was really much more popular. It wasn't until the 90s the red wine really started to turn the tide. So how did those? Now you were involved. Now there was a few of you. Dick Angel planted a vineyard off of McCourtney. Right. John McHugh planted a vineyard. He was also off McCourtney. Right. Richard Cobden was up on Cement Hill. Right. Wasn't George Jewett?
George Jewett off of Highway 174.
So there's a band of 7 or 8 of you, and there wasn't Smith, Wayne Smith. Wayne Smith planted off of Dog Bar.
Right.
Now, did you guys all get together and talk about it, or was there any kind of organization? Or
what happened was that Garth Veerkamp, who was the new farm advisor up there, the Veerkamps are old orchard families down in El Dorado County.
Okay.
But anyway, he's a UC extension agent, and he pulled everybody together in 1977. He pulled everybody together in a meeting about establishing a grape growers association. Okay. And so that's what we did. And we're about split half and half between people putting in vineyards in Nevada County and people putting in vineyards in Placer County.
And that would have been the east of Auburn area, our side of the Placer County, as opposed to Roseville, for example.
Absolutely, up in the higher country.
Okay.
Right. over toward Forest Hill, for example.
Okay, and so you would so you got together. Garth pulled this meeting together,
Right.
and what happened there?
Well, we decided to establish an organization. We figured maybe we could have buying power, for example. If we wanted to buy grape stakes for 5 vineyards, why we could get a truckload or something like that.
Okay.
So that didn't really work out that much, but more than anything, it turned out to be a trade of information and getting experts in to talk to us and tell us about things.
And did you meet on a regular basis?
Yeah. I guess we met once a month, something like that.
Yeah, and that was the origins of what we now call the Sierra
Wine and Grape Growers Association.
Sierra
Right.
Wine and Grape Growers. That was the origins.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And now, what did you all? There was no winery in the county.
No.
And it does not sound like Doug Watson in Sunnyvale with La Purissima was doing very well if his
No.
wine was rotting in barrel.
Right. Yeah.
So what did you all think you were going to do with your grapes? What was the plan?
You know, it's interesting. At that organizational meeting, Garth pulled people out of El Dorado County, from Davis, from even somebody from Gallo showed up.
Okay.
And somebody asked, he said, how big a vineyard do you need to be interested in buying grapes? If you have a half acre, if it's good grapes, we'd buy it. He said. So that gave everybody a lot of enthusiasm. It might have been a little bit misplaced, you know.
Now, is there any record of Gallo buying any grapes from anybody?
No, I don't think ever.
Did anybody approach it and they said we didn't mean it? We were just kidding? No. But nonetheless, because it's not insignificant in terms of cost to plant a vineyard.
No, it isn't. And today it's really expensive. Back then it wasn't so bad.
Okay.
But, today, $50,000 or $60,000 an acre would not be unlikely at all.
So what year did you plant your vineyard, for example?
Ours went in 78.
78. So you're starting to get grapes in the 1980, 81 era. What happened? What did you all do with your grapes?
Well, about that time, Nevada City Winery came along. Alan Haley got together with us, and he and Tony Norskog, they that old business of Nevada City Wineries, lots of wineries started in the garage, but not many people can say that this winery started in one garage, went to another garage, and wound up in a third garage where it still is. And they go down to Davis. They go down to Davis to do their stemming and crushing and pressing. And they took...
In 1980, Alan and Tony, they did it down at Cachet Cellars, down in Davis.
Right.
Okay, so did you sell your in 1980 or 80? Because Nevada City Winery started in 1980.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So do you think that Nevada City Winery or Alan Haley was really the instigator or the instigator of that? Did he see that there were grapes and thought, oh, here's an opportunity? Was he completely independent and just wanted it to start a winery anyway?
I think it was more independent. I think it was
Did you know Alan in those days?
I hadn't met him until then. Until Richard Cobden introduced him to me to him, I should say.
And you knew Richard because he was one of the early growers.
Right. Yeah. And he was I was a patient of Richard's, and Richard was a client of mine.
Okay.
A forestry client. So we had and his cousin. He had a cousin who was a partner in the consulting firm I was in. That's how I got to meet Richard.
Okay. Now, when you guys say if you knew Richard and did you and Richard say, "Hey, I'm going to plant a vineyard"? Yeah, I think I'm going to plant one too, or were you just both operating independently?
Both independently. Independently.
So, did you approach Nevada City Winery or Alan Haley and say, "Hey, I've got grapes for sale," or did they come to you and say, "Hey, we need some grapes"?
Well, it turned out that I helped found the winery. Actually.
Okay.
So there was the group of us. There was Alan and Tony and Richard and, oh gosh, what was his name? Pirelli Minetti.
Oh, yes.
Bill Pirelli Minetti.
Bill Pirelli Minetti, yes.
And a couple of others, anyway.
People will recognize the Pirelli Minetti name as an old, I believe, a Napa Valley.
No, Madera, wasn't it?
Madera?
I think they were down that direction.
Maybe the Central Valley. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And now I know that certainly the first couple of years that Nevada City Winery was making grapes, they were buying from the Calendar Vineyard.
Right.
So I think their first production was all red because those were the only grapes that were available in the county.
Yeah.
In
certainly 80 and 81, I think that's true.
So Doug Watson in La Purísima would have had them in 76, 77, 78, probably 79, who knows.
Yeah, I don't remember that, what happened. Yeah.
And then Nevada City Winery comes in. So Alan must have seen. I mean, I know that he grew up here, and I knew he always wanted to be in the wine business locally. But nonetheless, he must have perceived that the time was opportune to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there were grapes with no home.
Yeah, he had great dreams of what could be done.
Do you remember? I'm sure you do. Do you remember the old airport?
Oh yes,
dreams.
Yeah.
Just to tell us, if you were involved with Nevada City Winery in the early days, tell us about that.
Yeah. We actually leased that old airport.
First of all, tell us where the old airport is.
Way up on top of the hill behind Nevada City,
above where the Rood Center is now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Off to just behind the Rood
Behind the Rood Center, and there's a big old flat top up on that mountain.
Yeah. And the idea was we were going to build a winery there. We were going to put in a vineyard there. As a matter of fact, Tony Norskog and I went up to Manton in Shasta County and picked up a vast pickup load of cuttings to bring back to heel in to start the nucleus of that vineyard.
Okay. And when was this?
This was 1982, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds about right.
Yeah. And we heeled them in. And what we did, we got a ditch witch, a trencher, and we trenched part of our upper pasture on our ranch.
Where you are?
Yeah. And we rooted the cuttings there.
Okay.
And so then 1983 comes along, and I got a contract to work in Ecuador for 4 years. So I moved down to Ecuador, and Tony, meanwhile, the airport plan had gone belly up. It wasn't going to happen.
It never materialized.
So here are all these grapes. Most of them Sauvignon Blanc. So people like Don Sweet would come to Tony Norskog and say, "I want to plant a vineyard. What should I plant?" Sauvignon Blanc, he'd say. Really good. Really. And it just so happens
I've got a deal on Sauvignon Blanc.
So all of a sudden, by the time we got back from Ecuador in '87, and I kind of about this deep in Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay.
Well, so the airport went belly up, unfortunately.
I, just as an aside, there was one time in 1983. I don't think many people know this, but there was one time in 1983 when Nevada City Winery had Sauvignon Blanc for sale, bottled under 5 different labels.
I didn't know that myself.
Yeah. So they just kept trying to repackage it in a different format to try to move it along because there was so much Sauvignon Blanc that they had. Yeah, right. It was. I don't think a lot of people know that. So then. So you were out of the picture then in the early 80s.
We'd get back on leave in the summertime for maybe 2 weeks, something like that.
Okay.
And we were there for a couple of harvests, for example.
Okay.
And then we were talking early before the program about powdery mildew. It was odd when we first established these vineyards. Nobody was spraying for powdery mildew. It just didn't exist. And all of a sudden it came. In 1986, it just hammered our vineyard. It was just terrible. I don't know who owned a spray rig, actually, in Nevada County.
Well, it's commonplace now for mildew, once bud break sets in, that you spray every 7 to 10 days is the common...
Well, there's some new ones that can extend that, but essentially, 7 to 10 days.
That you're out in the vineyard on a pretty regular basis spraying, and you didn't spray at all.
No, we didn't. The first few years, never sprayed Calendar Vineyard at all, and there was never any problem. Suddenly, it found Nevada County.
Is that the good old days back in the day? I suppose we'd say, right? So now you mentioned phylloxera, and for the audience that isn't familiar with phylloxera, is a little root louse that will kill attacks the root and kills the vine. Mm-hmm. So. The original vineyard that you're talking about, the John Callender Little Wolf Vineyard, just tell us what happened to that vineyard.
Yeah, well, John sold it. He went into that business you were talking about subdividing. Mm-hmm. And so that was on 140-acre piece. And he sold that to Richard Peterson, and then Peterson sold it to Danny Kemp. And Danny Kemp apparently brought some infected stock, root stock, from somewhere down the Napa Valley or something like that. And all of a sudden, phylloxera showed up in that vineyard.
And so, just to have a sense of timing, any idea
2003.
when? 2003.
2003. And Danny had bought that. He was a cattleman. He wasn't a great... He was the eater at Bear River.
Okay.
And so anyway... he just looked at that as an excuse to get out of the vineyard business. So he yanked the vineyard.
He had the vineyard for sale at that time. Hadn't he?
No, he didn't have it for sale.
Oh, I thought he was trying to sell it.
Well, he didn't try to sell it as a vineyard. He yanked it.
Okay.
He yanked it and made it back into pasture.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
Now, does he still own the property?
No, he lives there, but he doesn't own the property.
Okay.
Some Italian investors bought several 40 acres, apparently.
So our first modern vineyard in Nevada County, planted in 1974, no longer exists.
No,
it's gone.
Right. Yeah.
So the two pictures that we're looking at of John Calendar's kids,
right,
those are the only pictures in existence of the vineyard.
Peterson may have taken some, and Danny may have taken some, but certainly in the early days, yes. Those are the only two we know about.
Are you in touch with the Petersons at all?
No.
Or Danny, are you in touch with them?
I haven't been for a while.
I should see.
Yeah,
okay.
we can find out.
So that vineyard no longer exists. Well, I think I thank you for bringing us up to date on how those early years started. We've often wondered, we have such a thriving industry, and there's 20 wineries in the county, and there's hundreds of acres of vineyards, and
6 or 7 more wineries just across the border. And
it all started in 1974. And on Perimeter Road with John Calendar's Little Wolf Vineyard.
That's
well,
right.
Peter, thank you for joining us on Wine Talk, and it's a pleasure to walk down memory lane and capture these old memories.
A lot of fun.
All right, thank you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this edition of Wine Talk, and I want to just put in a little teaser for our next show. I've invited Mark Henry from Montaliva Vineyard and Winery in Chicago Park to be our guest. He is very much in the Tuscan Italian realm of winemaking, and is very interested in discussing why he thinks Sangiovese is the perfect grape for that part of Nevada County. And for those of you who want to taste along with us, Mark is going to bring his 2007 Sangiovese, and during the show he is going to taste it and talk us through what he thinks it is, and you can join us and taste along with us. So that'll be the next edition of Wine Talk. I'm Rod Byers, and this is Wine Talk, and we'll see you next time.
SPD Markets combine hometown style and service with all the conveniences of today's supermarkets and more. There's quality, selection, and local goods throughout the store. Need postage, a money order, or pay a bill? SPD offers that service too. It's all about making life a little easier and helping our community by giving 3% of your purchases to local schools and nonprofits. SPD Markets in Grass Valley, Nevada City since 1959.
Be sure to join us each week here on NCTV for the latest in sports action featuring baseball, volleyball, and swimming. Each week you'll see a great game from Nevada Union, Bear River, or Colfax on your leader in local sports coverage, NCTV. We'll see you there.
first.